Good morning, everyone. Good morning. Welcome to the second day of the CETA Europa Congress 2024. You survived the first one. I did too, miraculously. Okay, so we're starting off every day here together in plenary. We're closing off every day together in plenary. And today we're starting off with what we call in this program this year idea fireworks. So they are short presentations, short ideas, not long and deep, but quick and spicy. To just get all our brains a little bit up and running in the morning. So we have 4 of those today. We're going to have Robert Gibson that is joining us online. He was supposed to be here in person, but then had to adjust slightly because of, life happens. And so, but I'm very, very happy that you're here with us this morning, virtually there on the screen. And we have everyone is waving at you. You don't see the crowd, but I'm just letting you know that what I'm doing right now, 100 people are doing back at you. So just imagine this 100 times because the camera is up there. So, of course, you can't start a day at a Congress without a few lovely announcements. So I have the task to share those with you. On the one hand is this sustainability survey. You might have seen papers like this taped to different surfaces. Not too many, so we don't print too much, but enough so that you don't not see them. And please quickly scan the QR code here, fill in how you got here, because we want a complete data set, even though not only from the people that took the bus, and then we have a skewed data set that nobody can trust, but a very complete data set. That would be great. Another thing to keep to share with you is that congratulations, you did wonderful with the coffee cups yesterday. Just keep doing what you were doing yesterday with the coffee cups, and we'll all be very happy bunnies. Thank you so much for that. A reminder for your planning for tomorrow already. If tomorrow lunch is something that you would like to have, then you need to think about that, because the canteen and the university restaurants are not working on Saturdays. They're not cooking. I'm not cooking. You're not cooking. We have to find someone who's cooking that is neither you nor me. But just to inform you, the canteen is not going to cook. So if that was on your horizon, then you need to readjust your plans for that. But there's plenty of little restaurants and cafes and so on around here, so no worries about that. And then one last thing, do you want to scoot through? Of course you can. There you go. The latecomers, let's all pay attention to who came late this morning. No overt judgment, just inside. Yeah. Okay. And then one last little practical thing. There is a room change for one of the sessions at 2 o'clock today, the one on AI. So if you were planning to be at 2 o'clock in room 203, you might not find anybody in there because they all go to room 226. But it's on the same floor, just around the corner. If you feel disoriented, just call for help and somebody will probably hear you. All right, so with that, those are our practical announcements for today. And with that, I'm happy to inform you that I will shut up and just introduce Robert. I don't think there's this TV show with David Letterman that is called My Next Guest Needs No Introduction. I don't know if anybody knows it, but this is literally the case right now. Our first speaker today needs no introduction because it is Robert Gibson. I'm sure most of you or many of you will know him. Some of you will have read his book. And I'm very glad to hand over the room to you, Robert. Enjoy.
Thank you very much. Thank you. I think we have a couple of slides. Yep. Brilliant. Okay. I'd like to thank you, first of all, to the organizers, particularly to Steve, for making this possible. Unfortunately, I got a very nasty bug last couple of weeks and was unable to travel, but I'm enjoying following some things virtually. What I'd like to do today, and I believe I have about 8 minutes, so I'll try to keep to that, is to tell you a story. Now, this is a story, I know a lot of you into storytelling, so this could be interesting for you. So once upon a time, there was an interculturalist, and his name was Robert. And he was the training manager in an international company. And he worked with training consultants, trainers, developers of material, and customer services. One day he walked into his office and he saw that people looked a little bit worried. And he was a bit puzzled by this, so he listened to what they were saying. And they were talking about three numbers. The numbers were 70, 20, 10. 70, 20, 10. 70, 20, 10. Everybody was talking about 70, 20, 10. I don't know if you know what that is. I had no idea. I didn't know what this 70, 20, 10 was. I'd like to give you a bit of background to this before I tell you what it is. So if we have the next slide, please, Steve. Some of you may remember this. Those of you who are a little bit older in the audience will remember something we used to call face-to-face training. This involved people coming together physically, often in a very nice location. This is the Hotel Alpenblick in Olstadt in the Bavarian Alps, where I spent many, many days. Robert spent many days in this hotel. And you can see how beautiful it is, working on the terrace in the summer with a lovely setting. And this was where, in this company, people did intercultural training. Most of it was done face-to-face in hotels like this. Some of the courses were 2 days. So we had 2 days intercultural communication. And then if you were interested in going deeper, you could book another 2 days intercultural cooperation, more for teams. And if you were doing culture-specific training, then maybe you had 3 days to prepare you and your spouse to go to the USA from Germany, or to go to China. China was a bit longer. That was 3.5 days. And this was great. It worked very well. People were happy. It seemed to be going extremely well. And then, if we have the next slide, came something called e-learning. When Robert joined the company in 2000, this was an e-learning hype. It was, in fact, an e-business hype. The company said, we want to have a goal of 25% of our business should be e-business. They set up an e-business accelerator at Munich Airport. So where people could, a sort of incubator where people could create ideas, and they didn't even have to travel into the town because they could just go to the airport. And in the learning area, they had what was called an e-learning factory. And to set this off, the first employee meeting that Robert went to was in a warehouse in the north of Munich. The boss arrived on a forklift truck in some artificial smoke, and Charlie Chaplin's Modern Times was being shown on a screen. Very dramatic. And our job was to produce e-learning modules. A bit provocative, this picture. This is a prediction of 2000 that was made in the early 20th century. But actually, it was a bit like this sometimes. One of the colleagues that I had, that Robert had, talked about doing a deal with a publisher and digitalizing travel guides. And this would be intercultural competence. So we wouldn't need to go to those lovely hotels anymore. We could just have this as our work. Robert wanted to do a deal with his friend Peter Franklin in Constance and work with him on the Delta Academy, which was actually before its time. Anyway, what happened was some years ago, maybe about 10 years ago, the management discovered something called 70-20-10. And they realized that this would not only cut costs, but also mean that training could reach more people. So now I'll tell you what that is. That's the next slide. 70-20-10, if you don't know this model, it's been around for a long time, but this was when the management discovered this, was that 70% of learning is actually from at work, is from on-the-job experience, from doing things, doing your work, doing your job, doing new jobs, job rotation maybe. 20% is informal learning. That's learning from your peers, from your co-workers, watching a YouTube video, learning by yourself, but informally. And the sort of training that I mentioned, and also includes e-learning, this formal training is only 10% of learning. So the management says, well, why do we focus so much money, resources, time on training when actually we should be thinking of these other things? So they came up with the idea, which is the next slide, of the toolkit. The toolkit then is the idea that actually we don't just do training, but do all sorts of things. And this came to a head when we had a big initiative about unconscious bias. We called it Making Better Decisions. And we were supposed to reach as many people as possible in the whole world in the company. And we worked out that, okay, we wanted to reach 250,000 people. If we spent 100 euros per person, which is not so much, we would have 25 million euros for this one initiative. That was too much. Plus the travel costs, plus the time people were not doing their work. The other problem with a diversity initiative that some of you will be familiar with is that one size doesn't fit all. What is a must in one country is illegal in another. So we set up a global expert team, and Robert was asked to design an unconscious bias toolkit system. And this was a collection of all sorts of resources which people could use when they did their training. So they customized, configured their own training. Okay, but then, and I use that idea in my book, Bridge the Culture Gaps, which is where this picture is taken from. Let's now, though, move on to the latest development, which is the learning ecosystem. And I want to talk about that. That's the next slide. So the learning, and this picture is actually created by AI. So I created it by asking AI what learning ecosystems were. And a learning ecosystem is a system of people, content, technology, culture, and strategy within and outside an organization which impacts formal and informal learning. And this company, which is a real company, Siemens, in March 2024, they had implemented this, and they have 230,000 unique users, 170,000 learning resources, and 400 active curators in the company in this learning ecosystem. Their aim is that this KPI, key performance indicator, is that each employee should spend at least 25 digital hours, learning hours a year. And that's not just management, that's every employee, including the blue-collar workers. The aim is to accelerate time to competence. The organization is no longer a training provider, it's a learning enabler. And the people they employ are now, who are involved, are co-creators, curators, as in a gallery or museum, and ecosystem architects. The training consultant who took my job when I left 5 years ago, she called herself a training consultant in 2012 when she joined the company. Now, according to her official title, is Global Learning and Growth Ecosystem Orchestrator. Global Learning and Growth Ecosystem Orchestrator. You may think that this is like a fiction, like a BS bingo, but actually this is a corporate reality. Last slide. I would invite you in CETA today and tomorrow and afterwards to think about your role, where your learning comes from. Does it come from going to a talk or a workshop? Hopefully, but it also will come from interacting with your peers, and it will also come from getting involved in the organization. That's where 70% of your learning will come from. It was certainly where my learning came from when I was involved with CETA in the board. And I'll just leave with one final example of how this learning happens. I remember having a board meeting in Brussels, and it was coming to lunchtime, and we had to decide where to go for lunch. And I won't tell you who was in the board at the time, but that some of those people are in the room today. And somebody said, let's skip lunch. We don't need lunch. Somebody said, let's grab a sandwich. Somebody said, the world's problems are too serious to worry about lunch. And I'll mention one person, Marie-Thérèse Class, who was the president at the time. She'd actually booked at a wonderful restaurant in Brussels. I'm not sure if I'm correct in thinking, but I think that restaurant was called The Ultimate Hallucination. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Robert. So I know yesterday Ayla was very generous and allowed some questions and so on, but that's not the firework shows I know. So we're just going to go from idea to idea to idea to let that just be marinating. And we'll go over to Florence, who will talk about identity and third culture kids and so much more. I think burgers. I think I'm hungry.
I hope you're hungry. Hello, everyone. My name is Florence Chaberdière. Sounds really French, right? But I don't look French. It's because most of the time people don't believe that I'm not French. And I would like really to share with you a secret, is that Florence is not my birth name. Today I wanted to, I see some faces like what? I wanted to share with you my journey of being adopted to a TCK, to also being raising 3 TCKs. When we actually move around the world, we have to invent ourselves. My journey has taken me from the darkest time of human suffering to discovering resilience and hope. I have to let you know another secret, because everything started with child trafficking, where my innocence was stolen and my identity was shattered. As a survivor, finding myself and might have seemed impossible, I began to piece together the mosaic of my identity, one fragment at a time. In our lives, we all experience brokenness. For example, the fact that I was stolen and that I will never know who I really am. And after that, we also experience losses. I had a stillborn baby. And obviously, we also experience challenges, having this expat life, moving in 9 different countries. I also have 3, not 1, 2, but 3 autoimmune disease. We talked about invisibility yesterday. So, and there are no cure to be found. So how do we create our identity based on all of this? Very easily, I would say. It's really something that really impacted me profoundly. Maybe you know about it, but it's a kintsugi. Kintsugi really embraces our imperfections, but also the imperfections of others. And this reminds us that what could be seen as broken, for example, in Western culture, everything that is broken can be just something to discard. But in Japanese culture, this is something that really reveals beauty and strength, because with golden lacquer, we will just stick the pieces together. This is our beautiful plate then we can put after that our beautiful burger that actually helps you create our identity. So I know it's a bit early, but we always have some room for burgers. So first of all, we will start with bread. So bread is actually our origin. So I was born in Sri Lanka, so my bread has a bit of curry spices. My mom is Italian, so it's a bit of focaccia, ladies. And my dad is French, so I have some baguette on it. And obviously, one of my diseases is celiac disease, as you all know from yesterday evening. So it's actually all gluten-free. After that, the bread will never change. So we will put some proteins inside. I know there are some vegetarians in the room, so for me, it will be bacon, because bacon is where I actually live now in London, in the UK. So bacon is really... where's my bacon? My bacon is there. So is my personal experiences, what makes me today, my travels, the fact that I moved around the world, the fact that I have friends all around the world. Robert just said, in fact, we all are Zoom friends at some point, and how lovely it is to actually meet real people in this CETA conference. After that, we have some vegetables. Our vegetables represent our values and belief. Regardless of where we live, we do have our values that can evolve. So for example, my value for me, having lived in New York, it's pickles. And pickles, why? Because it's really the country of meritocracy, the US, the Americans in the room might know. So the harder you work and the most possibility you can manage to find. And also the belief that everything is possible. And I will let you know another secret later, but I think regardless of where we go, it's important to really put some ingredients in our burger and always keep in mind that we can become a juicy burger. So the more ingredients we have, the more juicy we become. After that, as you can hear from my accent, I'm French, so I couldn't put and go without cheese. So the cheese is a need we fulfill. We are quite many women in the room, and we know that we have many hats. We are wives, we are daughters, we are moms, and sometimes around the road in our expat experience, we forget ourselves. So if we want to really make sure that we can find our identity, we need to know the needs that we need to fulfill to be happy. After that, we will go with seasoning. Seasoning is the seasoning that we put, and what I will put it in my metaphor as a cultural intelligence. So, for example, salt and pepper will be the fact that we can actually really embrace cultural diversity. We can also have exotic spices from my Sri Lankan background, so that would be make sure to have this openness when we move from one country to the other, or when we are training with different cultures. And we will also have, it's all everything that makes sure that we can develop our cultural intelligence. And then, of course, condiments. Condiments are so important because without this global mindset, as we all know in our trainings, it's quite difficult to make sure that we can really make the most of our experience abroad. So global mindset will be ketchup, for example. That would be compassion towards ourselves, but also towards others. It can be also mayo. Mayo will be the fact that it really is this thing that you use to communicate with others and obviously not judge people at first sight. And also we always have to remember, and you all know this, but we don't see things as they are, we see things as we are. So when we see all of the burger, this will help us to build our identity. When we are parents, when we are children, we try to navigate between assimilation and heritage, which is not easy all the time. So what I wanted to ask you is, how do we embrace the kintsugi? How do we embrace the burger and make sure we can create our identity? I think it's really in embracing our roots, but also embracing the world. It's the fact that we can really make sure that even if we have some scars, even if we have challenges, we can just make sure that we transform them into strength, and this strength we can really carry it wherever we go. In my case, even if I don't know where I come from, I know where I go thanks to the burger. And I wanted to make sure that we keep in mind that identity is not a destination, but a continuous evolution. And also that happiness is a way of being. And I'm not going to cry, but it's quite important to keep in mind that mindset is key. And I told you I was going to tell you my real name. So my real name is Sarojani, which is a Sri Lankan name. And I hope that with this, we can really make sure that we understand our past, but as parents, as trainer, those tools can really help us to really embrace the future and make sure that with this mindset, we can help each and everyone to navigate in this journey of life. Thank you very much. I know we were not that many women in the panels, so I wanted to celebrate, because we have to celebrate our identity and our diversity. So I know it's a bit early, but please feel free to come and pick a burger so you have the sugar rush you need to have your day. Thank you.
Thank you so much. That was wonderful. Thank you. All right, we switch gears to Mathieu, who will talk about something very different, implicit associations test, if I remember that correctly. I think so.
Yeah.
And here we go.
Okay. So how do you do this? I have my notes here, the pointer here and the mic here. We'll see. Thanks, Patricia. Florence, merci bien. It's hard to speak after you. It was juicy, it was personal, it was emotional. Now it's going to get, well, at least I hope it's going to be a little bit of fun. Science is dry, usually it's about numbers. Let's look at bias. Bias is a pop star. It's been getting a lot of attention in the field of culture and diversity in the recent years. It's been influencing my work. Did it influence your work? Well, let's look at bias in more detail. I would like to talk about the implicit associations test just as an example of research that is being done into bias. My name is Matthew Collig, and the first time I took an implicit association test, I think that's about 20 years ago. And you all know about the IAT, I think. I will see if I can control the slides. Yep. If you have read this New York Times bestseller, you have heard about the implicit associations test. Blind spot, the hidden bias of good people. So when I realized this was a New York Times bestseller, I thought, wow, this is cool. I made some research long time ago that could be important for an audience like this. Let me explain to you what the IAT is, the implicit associations test. Okay, so this is two examples of what the IAT does. It produces results. And this is the two results that I got to test the IAT before I prepared this presentation. This is my results, yeah? Not going to read them out to you. So what am I going to do with this? I'm not sure. Let's see what the IAT is. So I have a task for you. If on the next slide you see a word that represents a fish, please turn your head to the left. If you see a word that represents a bird, please turn your head to the right. Ready? Okay, if you look into somebody's face, you're wrong. Okay, good. Let's try. Okay, let's try. Ready? Okay, I'll repeat that. I knew. I'm at a theater conference. People don't listen. Now, this is the really easy thing. Fish left, bird right. Fish left, bird right. No. Fish left, bird right. This is the most easy thing that we're going to do. Okay, go. Okay, good. Okay, that's it. We're getting there. Next phase. If you see a fish word, please turn your head left. You'll see what a fish word is. Or if you see a bird word, then please turn your head to the right. Fish word, no. Ready? Yep. Yes. Okay, it works. Now we're going to have a combination of these tasks, okay? So this is still the easy thing. It's going to get hard. So fish word, please turn your head to the left. Bird, bird word, please turn your head to the right. Ready? Okay. Now comes the creepy task, the funny task. And that's the implicit association test. There's a lot of, there's a lot of theory behind this, but we have semantic networks, so it's obvious that this task is very intuitive to you, that this task is hard. Please turn your head to the left if you see a fish word or a bird. Fish word or bird. Yeah, I mean, I know that you're not going, that you paid to get here, but let's try hard. And then bird word and fish right, okay? Ready? Ready? Okay, let's try. Okay, good. That's better. So you have now experienced the logic of an implicit associations test. You have experienced a task that we would call the compatible task. You know, if you turn your head to fish word to one side, that's compatible, and bird words to the other side, that's also compatible. Now, and then the last task was incompatible. These words did not fit together. It's hard to do this. Now, the implicit associations test, when you do that with people, you use a computer, of course. You can do that online, and you have to use a keyboard to react. And what researchers are interested in is your reaction time. You can also measure the mistakes that people make, but it's really reaction time that people are interested in. And now it's getting a bit hard. I'm going to show you the items of the first implicit associations test that was introduced, I think, in 1998 by the author of the New York Times bestseller. So the incompatible task for white subjects would be pressing the same button for Black Americans and positive words, and the other button for white Americans and negative words. Okay? So that is research. And since then, well, I can go back if you want to take a picture. I guess the slides will be shared also. So you see that it's going to be interesting to see what kind of subjects sit there and how they react to the different items. Yeah, I want you to digest the slide. You understand it, I hope. We've replaced bird words and fish and stuff like that with human beings and negative and positive associations. Good, so this was done with a lot of groups. And when I looked at this first time, it occurred to me that it's always been done with groups where we have an intuition or where history tells us that these groups have some kind of issue. Right? I mean, to summarize, that maybe there's a relationship problem between these groups. And, you know, it always is the same. Yes, there is an implicit associations test effect, an IAT effect, which is, depending the group that you are, it's more difficult to do the incompatible task. You can measure that in milliseconds, by the way, in milliseconds. So I thought, maybe this research is biased, right? We should look for disconfirming evidence. So I did do research with a group where we would, you know, think that they have a good relationship. And I chose to do this with therapists and patients. I studied psychology, I was interested in helping people, and I had access to these people. So I tested psychotherapists, being people that were being trained to be psychotherapists, and their implicit associations regarding therapists and patients. And it might surprise you that I got the same results. I got the same results. So I will show you a little bit of numbers here. First column is the time in milliseconds that people took to take the incompatible task. So therapists and negative words, patients and positive words. Second column is the compatible task. Therapists positive, patients negative. And the little slice back there is the IAT effect, so the difference in milliseconds, 59 milliseconds. And you see the P, the significance there. I only had 20 people in that study, and I did the same statistics, the same statistical analysis as the researchers would do. And it was actually the only statistical analysis that would result in a high P, in a good significance. 59 milliseconds. I will show you the results for black and white IATs. It's, as you see on the right, it's more complicated, but I simplified for you. You see that, yes, okay, it's larger, 179 milliseconds, but it's still 179 milliseconds. Milli means it's 1 millisecond is 1,000th of a second, okay? And there is no barrier. There's no point where you can say, well, this was so short, let's not take it as a result. If you have 1,000 people take the IAT, it's probable that it will get a good P value, so it will be statistically significant difference. But what meaning does this have? What is the meaning behind that? I will conclude with this. If I just do an analog interpretation of the results of my study, this would be it. The subject responses suggest a moderate automatic preference for therapists over patients. Okay. I just have this feeling that they're not going to take out the baseball bat and beat somebody's head in, for these milliseconds. I'm sometimes a bit drastic with my words, but it's more us as we read these numbers and maybe our ideas about these human groups that make us give these numbers meaning than the numbers themselves. So you remember times when we listened to people who did very good research like Hofstede, and we deconstructed the research. I hope that bias is part of your work. It's part of my work. And I predict that times will come where we also construct the ideas that we have about bias, because they're all also just research and statistical results. And I invite you to revisit, and to look at the science behind bias. The science behind bias. Bias is a pop star. It's good to integrate it into our work, but I hope that we keep on reminding ourselves that it's a complex and challenging issue. It's not a simple thing. The deeper you look into it, the more complex it is. And I would maybe conclude, my opinion is, to say that we are all biased reduces complexity too much. It is more complex and more challenging than that, okay? I thank you for your attention. And I thank Diversity Icebreaker for sponsoring the event here. And thanks for your time and your words. I don't know where I'm with time. And Vincent's.
Thank you so much, Mathieu. All right, and finally, I have the joy to give the word to Vincent, who will speak about his own personal experience from being a reader to being a librarian.
Yeah, librarian has to do with books, right? So I have no slides. I have no burgers to share with you. Sorry for that. I have no fancy story like Robert had, okay? But I do have biases as well, like Mathieu had as well. So maybe we're still on the same line. Yeah, are you still with me? You still okay? Yeah, yeah. I try to look at it positively because in French we say on garde le meilleur pour la fin, okay? Whether it's F-E-N or F-I-M, I'm not sure, but okay. We have the burgers if we're hungry. So, okay, here we go. Yeah, I'm going to talk to you about the living library. The living library is a concept, it's an open dialogue concept which is derivated from the human library. The human library was created, designed about 25 years ago by Danes. And it's an open dialogue system in which, like in a library, you pick up a book. And instead of pick up a book out of a shelf, you pick up a person with a book. And that person will tell their stories, like in a book. And you are readers. You have readers, you have books, you have readers, and you have a librarian who needs to organize things a little bit, otherwise it's chaotic, right? So the living library is let's say, a light version of the human library. And I've dived into this concept years ago. And first I was a reader, started modestly being a reader, also be a book. And then I thought, because I'm an educator, a teacher, a trainer, I like to organize things and have people interact with one another. So I'd like to become a librarian. And I worked at the university, so we have a big library, and I was observing the librarian, how they're doing that job. It was always very interesting, very diverse. So I became a librarian. But first of all, let me reflect a bit on this readership thing. My very first experience was at the university. They had organized a thing with our students, very diverse. And this is based on our diversity intersectionality, in which try to identify books that are really have a story to tell. So my first experience was, I had 3 books to read. The first book was one of our students in their transformation of transgender, of being a boy moving to a man, moving to a woman. And that person was struggling in front of me, right with the book in front of me, telling their story of the struggle, physical, psychological, mental, of the struggle they were in, and it was very impressive, clearly. The second was a colleague of mine who had a schizophrenic mother, quite heavy as well. And the third one was one of the students, a colored girl who had suffered from racism. That was my first reading experience. I can tell you I was completely washed out that evening, because when you read something, it's fine, but when you have that book in front of you, no need to emphasize the fact that it's quite different than having just reading a book. Yeah, so that was my first experience. And then the second was also against transgender that we have at the university in the Netherlands. And there was a success story of a transgender person who had carried out that transformation completely. And it was a very nice book to read, so to say. Then I had a few more of disability, the whole intersectionality, the whole diversity spectrum, which was offered as this real human library. The living library, as I said, is a lighter version. And I've done that as a librarian now. That I'd like to reflect on that a little bit here, because some of you were books in my library. I did it in Malta 2 years ago, and there are books here. I did another occasion also for a CETA Netherlands event. There are also books here. CETA France recently, that was another story, but was also an open dialogue, so people know what it's all about somehow. So being a librarian means that when you organize this library, you can imagine that it's quite a preparation, because you need to identify those books. You want to have the best books, of course, the best books in town, so to say. So when you have a diverse population at CETA, you realize we are not so diverse after all. So in Malta, I had identified 10 books, and I had 30, 40 readers. So you organize a session in which you have a reader and 3 or 4 books. You have a book, sorry, of course, and they have 3 or 4 readers around, okay? The books just stay where they are, on the chairs, no table in between, a circle of chairs only, to obviously to stimulate interaction, the 5 senses we use when we tell a story, when we are present and interact with one another. So the books stay on the chairs and the readers rotate. One thing that I realized, you need to avoid this kind of popularity contest because some books look more attractive than others. We know we shouldn't judge by the cover. And so as a librarian, I could step in somewhere when the book was not so popular, that I could step in as a reader as well. And you need to be flexible, so careful with that. The best thing is to do, if you want to do it, and I would certainly encourage you to do that, organizing those libraries, to have actually the readers rotate and not choose books like that, because otherwise you have this kind of popularity contest, which is not good, which is not this kind of open dialogue and inclusion process you want to realize. So that once you've done that, and the important role of the librarian as well is, of course, to organize the books, have enough readers. Recently at a congress in Vienna, I had organized books, but I had no readers. That can happen as well. So in that case, you do something else, which I had anticipated, and I did another activity, the story circles, which I'm going to do this afternoon, self-promotion, by the way. Is that okay with you? Yeah, that's okay. Yeah. So you have to have an alternative if you don't, organize things, but sometimes it doesn't work. So again, organization is quite heavy. You need to have those books, brief the books, organized in 3 sessions. You have an hour and a half, so 3 sessions of 20, 25 minutes in which the books tell the stories, and then the readers ask questions, but it's up to the books to organize what they want. They are, of course, free to organize their own session. And then you rotate, and at the end, as the librarian, you also need to have some little bit of debriefing, clearly. You need to have, of course, the books share their experiences, but also the readers, and have, some final words on the inclusion process. It is open dialogue, inclusion process, talking about our biases, prejudices that come up in this open dialogue interaction. That's important, the role of the librarian. I would certainly encourage you to do that. I've also seen another one which is called People Library. I heard somebody show me that yesterday, the People Library as well. And the real thing, it's called those human library. You can become a certified reader. Okay, that's a whole process. I think some of us here are maybe certified readers of the human library. At CETA and other occasions, myself and others, we're doing more as I said, the lighter version, which is called the living library, and which involves books, readers, and the librarian as an open dialogue, interactive, inclusive process that I recommend. Myself, I've been through that process. It's about showing your vulnerability, because you are there as the librarian. You're not too sure what to expect. Some books can be very emotional. Some readers can also react very emotionally. So you need to, of course, to anticipate possible reaction in this respect, because you never know what's going to happen. And each library is different, or each session is different, clearly. So it's always a challenge for everybody, clearly, organizational challenge, but also a physical challenge sometimes, but more, of course, obviously, mental and psychological challenge. Self-inclusion, inclusion with yourself, with a group. You can carry out all kinds of aspects, making prejudices and biases more visible, speak about it that's also channel the librarian in a, let's say, safe, psychologically safe environment. Everything which is said within the reading session is, of course, confidential and not supposed to be taken away. So, and then finally, this afternoon I'm doing the alternative, the story circle, which will be different. The story circle is very interactive as well, but it involves everybody the same way. Everybody tells their stories. It's called the UNESCO Story Circle, 4:15 this afternoon. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, turns out we actually do have 10 minutes still. So we can either say, screw it, coffee, or we can have a few questions. Do we have some questions in the room to some of the speakers? I'm not, Steve, is Robert still with us in principle? No. You can ask Robert questions, but you need to do that later and send him an email about that because he's not here anymore. So any questions to the people in the room? I see Adrian, I see Dora, I see you, Ursula. Okay. All right. Let's, I think Adrian's hand went up first. So let's go. Adrian first.
Hi, this is a question for Matthew. It just occurred to me, I don't, obviously the IAT is done online, so it wouldn't apply. But if you were doing this, activity in India, would it work?
Yeah, these are the questions, right?
Yeah.
I mean, there is research
But how familiar are you with Indian body language? When you ask a question, they go like this.
Okay, I need to clarify.
No, it's just a joke, really.
Yeah. Okay. I was like, you shocked me there. You asked me two questions.
Just struck me.
Where are you from? You're from Ireland.
No, from the land of humor and jokes.
Are you
UK.
I was going to say, are you slagging? You know that there's research into bias that shows that there are biases that are culture bound. You know the fundamental attribution error? There's research that shows that that differs from cultures. I'm going to put it that way. Yeah, the fundamental attribution error is not called the fundamental attribution error anymore because it's not a universal error. It's not a universal bias. That's just my comment, maybe not my answer.
All right, thank you. Right, next question over there, Dora.
Hi. Just for context, I have a question to you, Vincent, because I've been working with the method of the Living Library for 18 years. I'm
Sorry,
here.
where are you? Oh,
I'm here.
Dora, of course. Oh, yeah, the book, yeah. Of course.
So I've been working for 18 years with the Living Library, for 2 years with the Human Library Organization. But I must say the last couple of years, the reflection on the Living Library and methods that originated from the Human Library grew really uneasy on me. So I have a question to you. How do you relate to my hesitation about methods that increase and I think amplify the power dynamic between the dominant groups and putting people from marginalized groups in positions where they are volunteering, but still they are put in a position of sharing their lived experience of discrimination. And I really grew a lot of questions and hesitance towards this method. So I wonder, how do you approach this?
Yeah, short question. Long answer. First of all, I would say every library session, I think I said that before, is different. Okay, so there will never be the same thing. Now, reflecting to what you said, certainly, I think if I reflect to what we've done at my university or in other situations like that, we indeed offer a podium to those people. They're completely the book. They're completely indeed volunteering. I think it makes me reflect or think of the whole quota business, in which we want to have a certain quota of whatever in diversity. I think it's the way to also amplify, but first of all to give a podium to these people to express themselves. Very importantly, that it needs to be in a very safe, psychologically safe environment. I'm not yet, maybe, I don't have the experience. You're a certified book, if I remember correctly. No? Well, librarian, organizer, yeah. Librarian, organizer. I've not that far yet, as you are, that you I still have my hesitations, of course, and I realize that it's a lot of for me mental effort as well to make sure that things go well. As I said, you try to put everything in good lines. So I realize it's quite a burden, but I'm not that far as you are of hesitating and questioning the process. I think it's still the opportunity to give these people, everybody, on a volunteering basis, a podium for that. So I'm not that far yet, no. But maybe I'll talk to you about that, yeah.
All right, thank you. We have 2 questions already lined up. We have 3 minutes until you all deserve your coffee, so we need to be economical now. I have Ursula and then Monica, and I would say you both ask your questions one after the other, and then we take the answers, and then we all go for coffee.
Yeah, first of all, thanks to all speakers. This was a great way of starting the day. Wonderful composition of contributions. Mathieu, and thanks for trying to kind of like go against the grain and do your own IAT against IAT tests. What struck me with the pair therapist and patients is that it's again an asymmetric relationship, or not again, but it is. There is one who's more of an agent, has more agency, the therapist, and the other is more on the receiving end. That might influence the speed with which we respond. Of course, there are loads of stuff, what kind of associations were tested, but I was just curious whether that would be a variable we could still, rule out with the next version of your experiment.
So,
one moment, Mathieu. Let's get the second question in first as well, and then we can do all the answers in one go.
Yeah, and as far as I'm concerned, we can go a little bit over time, and maybe somebody has a question.
I have a question and I'm very sorry that I forgot your real name, the name that was given to you by birth.
Oh, Sarojani.
Sarojani.
And Florence.
Thank you.
Flo, as we mentioned.
I wish we had the whole panel, like, the firecracker that you gave, because that really touched. So thank you for that. And I was wondering about the thing of the child trafficking that your life started with. In the Dutch community now, there is a Sri Lankan woman that has sued the Dutch government because of this. And she has opened up a big can and a big worms and, Pandora's, whatever you call it. But she's actually, putting it out there. How do you deal with it? It's a personal question, of course, but yeah.
No worries. I've been sharing my story, so I'm really open with that because I think it's important to share the message, and also that regardless of what happens to us, we make it a strength. I actually forgot to show you my beautiful kintsugi that I created on my own, so this will actually help you. When I found out that I was part of the child trafficking, I was actually in Saudi Arabia, so I was an expat. I found out, and I invite you to go take a few tissues with you because it's quite overwhelming. It's in French, c'est l'envoyé spécial des enfants volés du Sri Lanka. I found out through this show in Saudi Arabia. What happened is that you don't really know at first what you have to do or not. And when you find out that everything you've been told is actually untrue, it's difficult. When we are expats, it's already difficult. But when you find this as an expat, being adopted in France, it was tricky. So I went and see the French bureaucracy, which takes quite a while to get answers. So when the answers are untrue, it's even more difficult. Yes, I know the Dutch are really working on it. To be fair, the French government didn't recognize the 3,000 babies that it was actually a child trafficking. So this is where we are at today. And the next step, I don't know, because I make peace with that. It was important for me as a mom to explain to my daughters where I come from. And I think I'm okay with it. So do I really need to go into, you know, the French ministry or government or whatever to try to find an answer that I will never have. Maybe one day they will recognize it. I know French people are doing an amazing job, and I'm behind them and I'm helping them as much as I can. But I think it's also a question of mindset. Are the French people going to acknowledge the fact that they've done somehow a mistake along the way? So yeah, fingers crossed, we'll see.
Thank you so much.
You are incredible.
Your answer still, and then we go for coffee.
I would like to have my colleague Florence have the last word of this.
Okay, very good. Thank you. Okay. So well, okay. Thank you all. There's a coffee break now at 10:30. The first sessions. You probably know where you need to be. Enjoy.
Recording stopped.
Wir
sehen uns heute Abend.